Beetlejuice Beetlejuice is directed by Tim Burton and stars Michael Keaton, Winona Ryder, Catherine O'Hara, Jenna Ortega, and among others. And this is the long-awaited sequel to Tim Burton's cult classic, where basically Lydia and her stepmother end up gathering a funeral that happens with her dad, who passes away, and she's having some struggling with some being estranged with her daughter, that's played by Jenna Ortega, after some other personal stuff happens. And essentially, as you've seen from the trailers, there's an event that takes place where she ends up having to call Beetlejuice, and it also gets into some other plot points that involve where Beetlejuice is having to trying to basically get back with Lydia, and then on top, try to go after Lydia again like the first one. And you also have another plot line that involves where you have the ex-wife of Beetlejuice, that's played by Monica Bellucci, that's after him on revenge. And then you also have a plot point that's also involving with a storyline involving with Jenna Ortega's character that gets into some stuff where she's kind of becoming, where she's a skeptic, not really believing her mom's ways of how she sees the dead and everything. And it kind of goes a little all over the place, but essentially it's all pretty much intertwined with all these different plot points that come together. Now, here's a little backstory. Now, Tim Burton, I can honestly say, has been always one of my favorite directors of all time. Growing up, the 80s and 90s were a blast with a lot of his movies that he directed. Still to this day, as you can see behind me, the first Beetlejuice, I think, still holds as my favorite as far as Tim Burton's movies that he's directed. Even though I love Batman and Batman Returns, I still go to this film as my favorite because a lot of the creativity, a lot of the humor, a lot of the story that he was able to keep with the whole, like, exploring the realms of the afterlife and everything was just in the other world, the underworld and everything like that. In the netherworld and things like that. You know, Tim Burton just really had such a great way of cracking it with this one that I don't really see, like, for many years, I kind of always really wondered what it would be like if they ever did a sequel. In fact, in the 90s, they actually talked about doing a sequel for a long time, originally, with a script they had called Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian, which, funny enough, was actually going to be originally written by Kevin Smith at one point, but he turned that project down to work on Superman Lives. And I don't really know how that would have worked out, because I don't think that Beetlejuice really fits in the kind of light atmosphere. He's really a lot more better with the kind of darkness kind of style. And I know there was the cartoon show that explored a lot of that, which I did watch when I was a kid, which I enjoyed. But I think that was also more brought in its audience, because that was basically more of like a what if kind of scenario if Beetlejuice became pretty much a good guy. But to my surprise, over the many years, it was actually really interesting because for many years, they were talks about trying to do another Beetlejuice movie for the longest time. It's just every time that Tim Burton kept being asked for it, he kept doing other projects along the way. And Michael Keaton, for many years, didn't want to do it without Tim Burton. So it was always one of those things where he didn't know if he was going to do a sequel and stuff and all that. And over the years, it seems like Tim Burton's really had his quality decline with a lot of his movies that either became very mediocre or just flat out just not really that good, especially with when he started doing kids' movies like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and other kind of stuff like Alice in Wonderland that really didn't really do that well. And then he had some other decent ones which I didn't mind, like Dark Shadows and Dumbo, that weren't great, but they still were likable enough to where I still didn't mind them so much. So it seems like it's been probably since, I want to say, well, from what I've seen of Sweeney Todd, I think it's probably been since that I can really say is the most last at least great Tim Burton movies I've seen so far. And after seeing the trailer to this, it got me really hyped, because it was finally, after many years, they decided to bring the character back and everyone involved. And, well, they couldn't bring the dad back for obvious reasons I'm not going to get into. And also, they couldn't bring Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin back. And I think that was probably a smart idea, even though it would have been nice to at least get some more, references or other stuff with this one that they could have established with. But with that being said, though, I was still glad they were able to finally get this project being made. And after 35 years, I'm glad that Burton went back to full form, because I had such a blast with this movie. This is everything that I really loved from the first one. And while it may not be as great, it's not as great as the first one, but I still see a lot of the passion and a lot of the fun stuff that I really admire Tim Burton as a director. And everything that's in this film, from the comedy, from the performances and everything, everyone brought it together and made it work in their own right. And so to get my pros out of the way, I thought the cast in this were all phenomenal. What can I say about Michael Keaton? He still holds up as still as great as the character. He hasn't lost a beat. You know, he's got some really good funny one-liners that take place here and there, and there's even like a fun little musical sequence that takes place that I thought was really catchy and fun. Very similar to the first one, while maybe not as catchy as the first one, but still very memorable in its own right. And then it's great also seeing Winona Ryder back, and she was still great as Lydia. Because we also learned that Lydia gets her own kind of show that she's doing and stuff that's all about the supernatural and everything like that. And I love the way that they're able to capture the ways of dealing with her PTSD in this that I think really holds a lot of ground from the first one, especially the stuff that she went through and everything. So that was a nice touch. But also the rest of the cast, seeing Catherine O'Hara come back as her stepmother, and also Jenna Ortega I thought was great too, where she's kind of playing, unlike Wednesday, which from what I've seen a little bit, where she was playing the more gothic type of a girl, very similar to Lydia in the first one, she's the exact opposite in this, where she's a skeptic and she's wanting to just live a normal life and everything. So I appreciate they really made her to where she wasn't just rehashing Lydia from the first film, because she wanted to be her own kind of daughter. She wanted to be her own kind of character in this. But I will get into a little con I have just a little bit that deals with some of the stuff they could have fixed in some of the writing in that department. But I still thought she was great, and I love the chemistry it also has with her and this boy that she meets in the movie as well that I thought worked. So she was great. And then on top of the other ones I thought were great additions as well, like William Dafoe as this kind of former actor that's dead in the afterlife, and he ends up having to look for Beetlejuice and stuff, and having to help Beetlejuice look for Monica Bellucci's character. He was great because of the way that he's trying. There's a running gag where he's trying to essentially redo his old days of being as an actor on these kind of Hollywood movies and action movies and stuff, and just the way that he comes across is just very funny, especially him like reading cue cards and stuff like that. So that was great. And then Monica Bellucci I thought was a great addition to the cast. I do like her character. I think that she makes a very good addition as far as being the one that was left behind by Beetlejuice and has to get revenge on her. And she has a great introduction where she's basically piecing herself back together and everything. But I'll get into more of her later, because I felt like she was kind of short-ended, where she didn't really get a whole lot to do in the film, unfortunately. But I still liked her presence. I thought if Tim Burton really wanted to make like another, like if he wanted to make like an Addams Family movie, I think she would have really been a great Morticia, for sure, because she definitely has the look for it going. And so she was great. And then there were some other little cameos in this movie that I couldn't believe they actually got away with and stuff like that. And just seeing them were really fun to watch. And on top of that, I really got to appreciate the atmosphere, because you can definitely tell this definitely goes to that kind of Halloween type of setting and everything. The practical effects was really top notch, especially the stop motion with a lot of the scenes that take place in Beetlejuice's world and stuff. And while the stop motion for the Sandworm may not be as great as the original film, I still think it still blended well with the actual tone with what Burton was going for, because he goes for that very macabre type of style that's, you know, kind of on the acre of like we got with the first two Addams Family movies, but in a good way, you know, and just he makes it so much really mesmerizing with a lot of scenes where you're going through the places in the afterlife world where you're seeing like dead bodies of the people that are dead and stuff waiting in line and things like that. Just a lot of the funny gags that we see throughout the movie, just it had me laughing my ass off. And especially the kind of short-haired looking dudes that work for Beetlejuice and stuff, I was like, that reminds me of that scene in the first movie where he was talking to that dude. It's like he got his own little army going and stuff like that. You know, man, I just can't get enough of this movie. It's just everything that I really was pleased with, because also what I appreciate with the story is that they expand on a lot of stuff that we hadn't seen before. For example, I'm not going to get into spoilers or anything, but let's just say that they do a whole twist about basically bringing the dead back and everything. And they also do kind of an ironic twist on it that I thought really worked to its own regard in that level. That they carry it later on with. So that was great. And then there's also some other really fun stuff that they add to it, especially like this literally called the Soul Train and stuff that I thought was fun. And then and that was really great. And then you also have like some other things that we get to see that was actually kind of aching from the cartoon show, where at one point, not going to go into too much detail, but there is a point where Beetlejuice and Lydia kind of have to work together, and it definitely reminds me of a callback from the animated series, where in that show you're getting a lot of. That show was more about Beetlejuice basically being a good guy was being more of a good guy, and he had to work with Lydia and going through a lot of shenanigans and mischief and stuff. And just I really appreciate a lot of the really good like references to that. And then And one of my other pros I got to really appreciate is the score, also by Danny Elfman coming back was great, and the soundtrack they have with some classic songs in this were a good touch. So everything from the production quality, the atmosphere, and recreating the house and stuff, it almost became like a character of its own and everything with the setting and all that. And it's just great to see really a lot of the great practical effects back in order and stuff. It really is a great double feature with the first film. And so, plus on top of that, I was really surprised with a lot of the stuff that they got away with in here, because you actually do see some kind of bloody moments that take place in here, and it was actually in some of the gags they use where it uses, and some of the gags they use with the blood and everything, I thought was not only funny, but I was really surprised they got away with that in a PG-13 like this. Now, if I had to get into some of my cons, I will have to say that one of the things I do feel the movie holds the movie back is that there's a lot of too much like cooks in the kitchen, so to speak, because there's plot points they bring up that either are kind of short-lived or they're not really fully explored to that advantage. Like, for example, like I was going back earlier with Monica Bellucci's character, it feels like there was more story to her that they really could have spent more with, because she has a great backstory and the way that they set her up with it, but for about the rest of the film, she's kind of like ignored for a long time where we don't really see much of her, and it really could have like took more advantage of like her as a villain and stuff, because she really is like here and there throughout the movie, but she doesn't really get to do like a whole lot until she comes back toward the end. And so I think that it really could have had more potential with her villain. And you know, because it really seems like the movie was a little too all over the place with trying to put so many like different plot points and trying to come together and make it all in one movie. And I think that had the movie probably would have gone longer, you could have really explore more of that stuff, especially with the plot line we get into with Astrid and the boy that she meets and stuff. I'm not going to spoil anything, but there's really more to it that I think that they could have really explored more with. But I thought it did have a great payoff with it, at least. But I'll leave it there. And then on top of that, there's some other stuff, some other characters in the film that I honestly could have probably went without with, like Justin Theroux's character that's kind of like the boyfriend of Lydia. I felt like he didn't really add much to the movie other than some funny moments here and there, because it really is more of just like, you know, I guess they wanted to try to have, I guess, the Otho equivalent, but the difference with that is that in the original film, Otho was basically the one that was all obsessed with, you know, wanting to learn about the dead and everything like that. So it would have been a more interesting opportunity had they would have went with his character kind of being like on that approach, or at least did something that kind of really played more into the plot line, because it really felt like you could have taken the character out and really probably wouldn't have missed nothing. There's really going into detail, but that's pretty much the gist of it. But I still had an overall great time with the movie, and it's definitely something I can really hold acre to the first film. And hey, if this is the last one that is part of the series, because Tim Burton said that he probably doesn't want to do another one after this, I'm glad we finally got this one made, because it was such a great welcome return. And so with that, a welcome return for not only Tim Burton, but also seeing the character of Beetlejuice again in all of its glory. So with that, I'm going to give the movie a high compelling rate on the Film Freaks meter. And so, for those of you who have also seen Beetlejuice Beetlejuice, and also the first one, and also the anime series if you've seen it, let me know in the comments of what you thought about it, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next review. I'll see you later.